I just thought they were good for some reason, but they're not as good as we initially thought. A lot of you guys are thinking like, Johnny's gone crazy. He's just gone crazy. Maybe the editors will just like burn me alive after recording a 25-minute analysis video on my power rankings. Wow, so much analysis! What's up, everybody, and welcome to perhaps the final power rankings of the 2020 season. I'm Reinforce here, and it's time for the playoffs. Will we have more playoff power rankings? Who knows? I mean, teams are starting to get eliminated. I mean, they'll forever just be in a place in the power rankings, and I won't be able to change it up, so we'll see. I don't know how many more weeks I'm gonna keep doing this, but, you know, who knows what we're gonna do in the off-season? Do you guys want power rankings in the off-season? What am I supposed to power rank in the off-season? We'll get into the playoff power rankings because I'm changing up quite a lot. And I know you guys, you hate when I do this. I just changed up my power rankings with my own line of thinking, with no real results to really back it up, and none of that shenanigans. So we are changing up the power rankings quite radically because we have a new playoff meta underway. I've done some research behind the scenes, you know, been talking to people and just figuring out like what are we going to see, and then I've tried to figure out what teams will excel in that meta and what to expect given recent results. Of course, you know, there's been a long period where maybe we have considered Dallas Fuel a really good team, but the results haven't really been there as of late. You know, you can keep in mind your win against the Houston Outlaws, you know, dating back over a month ago, but apart from that, you know, you gotta change things up quite radically. So I'll give you my reasoning, but let's get into the ranking. So let's start at the top. So let's do APAC first, okay? Let's do APAC first because it's a bit more straightforward, I feel like. We know that the Shanghai Dragons, they're going to be number one. You know, everyone just knows they're number one, and I don't have to explain to you, but they're a phenomenal team. You know, they have Fearless, Void, Lip, Fleta. Oh my god, they have so many great players, right? And they're so flexible. So I don't think it's a real surprise to anyone that the Shanghai Dragons are number one at all, and they'll probably, you know, even go to the finals. You know, I would probably, you know, put my Overwatch box on on the Shanghai Dragons winning the entire thing. That's how confident I am in this team. So no real surprise, they are number one in APAC. For the number two spot, though, you know, there's a bit of a shake-up here, and I think there are really two teams that are competing for this spot. The people who took the number two spot in my power rankings is the York Excelsior, because I think they've been really good as of recent. But going into playoffs, I do have my concerns, because we've seen at times when they flex over to like a lot of hit scan centric compositions that it can be quite difficult to figure out who plays what really for this team, and how are they going to adapt to new metas. I think if you look back over the course of the season, they had some weird moments where they like started playing like Doomfist compositions, and they started like struggling with different types of compositions, and it seemed like they didn't have a great game plan that they were totally reliant on and could lean back on. It felt like they have a lot of different substitutions, whether it's Nene coming in or, you know, maybe we'll see Saibi in the playoffs. A lot of that different stuff that I think this team has to figure out, but given that they have so much player individual skill on this roster, I put them on number two. I think I have some concerns about Jonak if he's going to play Baptiste. We know that his Senora, his Ana is phenomenal. You know, it's probably up there like top 3 in the world, right? And that's with the likes of Twilight, Violet, Alarm. But like when it comes to the Baptiste, do have my concerns about Jonak. So depending on how this meta shapes out, I think I could have some concerns for the New York Excelsior, but they're claiming the number 2 spot over the Guangzhou Charge. Now, the Guangzhou Charge are number 3 in this playoff power ranking, and if you've been following the power ranking videos, you know that the Guangzhou Charge haven't been in my top 3 for quite some time. I do think that this team is still really strong, and I mean, they show that they are one of the few teams that have actually beaten the Shanghai Dragons in the APAC region in the Summer Showdown finals nonetheless, right? And yes, Dragons, they had problems figuring out Fleta and the Genji and how to play that composition, but still, this is a really good team, the Guangzhou Charge, and I'm forever impressed by what they're doing. What they've been doing throughout the season. You know, you have Krong in that off-tank role, who has been largely impressive, so we'll see how that translates into the playoffs. Still gotta put a lot of respect on this team. Now, at the number 4 spot, we have the Seoul Dynasty, and I mean, it's between them and Hangzhou, right? So the number 4 Seoul Dynasty, I think this team historically plays better come playoffs, and we'll see how that affects this year's playoffs, depending on the meta and how they'll figure that out. I think optimally they want to move away from that Genji. I think that Illicit had some good performances, but overall, if you're a Seoul Dynasty fan, I think you'd want Profit and Fitz to be the DPS duo for this team. How are they going to figure out their tank composition? I mean, so in practices, okay, we've seen in Ranked, Roadhog Zarya, there's talk about some D.Va coming into play, there's talk about Winston. I mean, if Gesture can really be on that Winston, I think that is really good for the Seoul Dynasty. Now, do you want Michelle to play in the off-tank position, or do you want Marvel to play the off-tank position? It's going to be quite difficult. I don't think we'll see as much Sigma this playoffs, and I think that's a big drawback for someone like Marvel on that off-tank role. So I think we're going to see more Michelle on that off-tank role to combine with Gesture, and then you have Profit and Fitz who can potentially pop off, right? So I think this Seoul Dynasty team, especially going into playoffs, have a lot of things going for them, and with the rumors about the meta, you know, we might see a bit more Widowmaker, Ashe, Tracer-like compositions, right? So we'll see how that plays out, but ultimately I think that really plays into Profit and Fitz on those roles. So I think this could be a good meta for the Seoul Dynasty. We know that they step it up in the playoffs, and I think this could be a team that you always have to be scared of, especially when Profit really turns up for his playoff performances. Now at number 5, the Hangzhou Spark, and I think this is a team that has a lot of good things going for them. You know, obviously Gushui, if he's allowed to play that Winston, that is going to be a big boon for this team. But also the damage duo of Architect and Godspeed. We know that they can flex to a lot of different things, but when it comes to the peak performance, well, they have the same power as, say, someone like Profit and Fitz in that duo. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for the Hangzhou Spark. You know, if you look back at the Countdown Cup, you could say like, well, they made it to the finals, they had some good performances, etc. But compared to the likes of Guangzhou, New York, and the Shanghai Dragons, it's going to be really hard for them to break into the top 3 teams in this APAC region. So some concerns for the Hangzhou Spark. They are a bit of a dark horse in my opinion, because I think that historically when Hangzhou Spark, they really figure out the meta, it looks really good for them. And given the fact that Godspeed and Architect can flex around a lot on this team, I think that with a meta that is still like in a state of flux, I don't think that the pros have really figured out the playoff meta yet, because they haven't had too much time actually practicing besides their ranked games, which is all over the place. I do think that the Hangzhou Spark, if they quickly find a composition that they're very comfortable in and that works for them, I think that the overall flexibility is really going to aid them in some of these early matchups, and then they can figure stuff out as they progress throughout the playoffs. So I think that the Hangzhou Spark, a bit of a dark horse in this APAC region when standing up to the likes of Seoul and Guangzhou, etc. So we'll see how that turns out with this team. But Hangzhou at number 5. Number 6 and 7 is Chengdu Hunters and Lana Spitfire. Not going to talk too much about these two teams, because I think you know what you're expecting when it comes to these teams. Chengdu obviously went on a little bit of a run when they played more Wrecking Ball and Jinmu was on that Genji, but I honestly don't think we'll see too much of that this playoffs. Wrecking Ball could be quite annoying to go up against if you have a meta like we have now that hasn't really been figured out. You can throw a Wrecking Ball in there, your opponents haven't really practiced against any Wrecking Ball, and now they have to figure out how to deal with it. Sombra is obviously going to be a problem there if you have a team that knows how to counter-strat Wrecking Balls, but for the most part, Chengdu Hunters, they're just relying on upsets, right? So it's going to be quite difficult for them in the APAC region. But let's get into NA. We already have a 9-minute video here. The editors are gonna go crazy at me for just like, wow, so much analysis! But that's how it goes, you know, we're going to playoffs, there's a lot to talk about. So, sorry, let's just jump into the NA region. So, number 1 spot in the NA region, it's going to be the San Francisco Shock. And before you guys bring up recent, quote-unquote, struggles, okay, they have the best peak performances in the North American region. Yes, they got 3-0'd by the Philadelphia Fusion. Yes, Philadelphia Fusion were allowed to be at number 1 for quite some time. But going into the playoffs, San Francisco Shock, in my mind, is still the best team in North America when it really matters and when it comes down to it. When you just look at this roster and their ability to play at such a high peak level, they bring the best Overwatch between them and Philadelphia Fusion when they play at their peak level. So going into the playoffs, I expect nothing less but for the likes of Ans, Striker, and Rascal to just pop off for this team. You have a super solid front line with Smurf and Triobin. I don't know how much playtime Super will see. I obviously don't think we'll see a lot of Reinhardt in this playoff. So, but Smurf and Triobin, fantastic front line. And then you have Violet and Twilight. Like, hello? Like, that's insane. So the San Francisco Shock, they are my number 1 team still, because I think that there's going to be quite a few directions you can go with this meta. But if we see something like Ash Tracer, I think this team will be obviously phenomenal in that you have Striker being able to play the Tracer, and then you have Ans being able to play the Ash or the Widowmaker, whatever is required of them. Meanwhile, if we look at our number 2 team, the Philadelphia Fusion, I always praised how flexible this team is because they have so many great damage players. Obviously, you have EQO, Ivy, Hisu, Carpe, which is great for a team like the Philadelphia Fusion going into a playoff meta that still, as I've said many times now, is still being figured out by these pros. And you could even look at like their tank line and be like, well, Fury and Poco is obviously great as well if you go into like a double off-tank meta. I don't think we'll see a double off-tank meta. I think we might see some Roadhog Zarya or Roadhog Diva or whatever. But for the most part, I think some teams will shy away from that unless you're super uncomfortable playing Winston for whatever reason. But when it comes to the Philadelphia Fusion, I have my concerns if we see more like Ash Tracer and they have to play some like Carpe and Hisu. How is that going to fare against the likes of Ants and Striker? That's where I really see the peak level start to drop off for this team. Now, that being said, I mean, the number 2, okay? If you're a Fusion fan watching this, how upset can you be about getting the number 2 slot? Like, really? Like, ask yourself. Is it a big deal to be number 2 rather than be number 1? I think, for the most part, people watching this video will agree that the San Francisco Shock deserves probably to be number 1 because they're the team you're the most scared of. And then Fusion, we know what they're capable of, but they get the number 2 slot in this pre-playoff power ranking. Number 3 goes to the Paris Eternal. They've been doing great things all season. Obviously, they struggled to begin with, but with the integration of XC and Sparkle, I mean, this team has just been phenomenal. You've seen the likes of Ben Best and Soon and even Nico rise up to the occasion and play better this season as well. So when you look at this roster on paper, there's not a ton of like holes in this roster. I am worried about the tank scenario though, because if you look at it, they have been flexing a lot between Ben Best and Nosmite. I think that they really have to figure that out going into the playoffs. I could even see them just commit to Nosmite fully and just play Nosmite and Hanbin, let Nosmite play that Winston, and then have Hanbin just do whatever he wants in the off-tank role because he's so good at it. But I think if you flex between Ben Best and Nosmite pretty consistently, like in the middle of series and stuff, I think that could be something that hurts this team in the long term in the playoffs. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, still, they're number 3 in my power ranking, so they're still a really good team. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but that could be a problem I could identify. We'll see how the damage scenario really plays out for this team. XC is obviously someone I'm very concerned about if I'm facing up against him because he's a T-Mobile MVP candidate. And then a Sparkle, how is he going to blend into this roster? I could see some potential problems for this Paris Eternal team if they rely too heavily on Sparkle's integration into this team. I think for a fact that there are heroes that Soon is probably better off playing, or Nico better off playing than Sparkle. Sparkle, we know what he's capable of. We saw what he brings on the Genji in the Summer Showdown in the Countdown Cup. But there are some heroes, like Sparkle's May hasn't been that impressive, right? So maybe you could integrate Nico into that role, or we could see even an XC and Soon duo. I'd be really excited about that. But Paris Eternal is still number 3 for a good reason. They're a really good team, and they have a great coaching staff behind them as well. So you really have to respect that going into the playoffs. But we'll see what they do with the roster. Interesting team for sure, because there are some question marks about the Paris Eternal. Number 4, it's going to be the Florida Mayhem, and I mean, they have been good throughout the season, and especially if they play more Ash Tracer compositions with BQB on the Ash, and then you will have Yaki being able to play that Tracer. I think this is going to be quite a good meta for them, so really going to help them further elevate their play going into the playoffs. And then you have Gargoyle as well. You know, maybe we'll see some Roadhog, maybe we'll see some Gargoyle Roadhog, huh? Stage 4 flashbacks from last year. That's going to be quite fun to watch. Regarding the main tank position, I do have my concerns about Fate potentially swapping over to like some off-tank hero if that is required of him. If we're going to see perhaps a little bit of the Roadhog and the Diva compositions, I think that is going to be something that hurts this Florida Mayhem team, because I think Fate is strictly like a main tank. I don't think he has any ability to swap over to the off tanks. And obviously a lot of speculation here, because who the hell prepares for main tanks to swap over to off tanks? You know, I don't have that analysis, but this is my assumption. I've also heard that Fate apparently has really bad aim, so he's not really doing any main tanks any favor in that regard and giving us a good reputation. So we'll have to see if he plays Roadhog with bad aim. I don't know how good Fate's aim is, but that could obviously be a factor if he's forced to flex over. I think the Florida Mayhem is going to be a team that reliably plays a lot of Ash Tracer, Winston, and then have Gargoyle swap over to the Zarya or Diva or whatever is required of him. And I think that they can bring a very good, fundamentally good level when it comes to the playoffs. So excited to see what this Florida Mayhem team brings. But they are good for sure. And they do have some upset potential when they go up against the likes of Paris Eternal. So going to be very interesting. For my number 5 spot, I have the Los Angeles Valiant. And I think you could make the case for the Los Angeles Gladiators in this regard. I don't think Atlanta Reign really have the punching power that we gave them respect for, or that I gave them respect for. God knows, I'm the only Atlanta Reign fan left, obviously. I'm not even a fan. I don't even know why I said that. I just thought they were good for some reason. But they're not as good as we initially thought. Los Angeles Valiant at number 5. And if we're going into an Ash Tracer meta, I think that obviously you gotta give credit to KSP and Shax in that regard. KSF could be integrated into this team somehow. He has some nice flexibility. I mean, hell, if we even see some Hangzhou, KSF's Hangzhou, why not bring it out, right? Also McGravy. McGravy just strikes me as someone who's really comfortable in like a chaotic meta like this. And if we see some McGravy Roadhog, we even saw him bring it out in the Countdown Cup for like a map on Hanamura, I believe so. That could be a lot of fun. Don't know how Dreamer would be able to flex over to some of these different heroes if that is required of him. But for the most part, I think that the Valiant is a team that is quite comfortable going into the playoffs because they know their strengths and they'll be very good at playing to their strengths. And I think they'll get away with that for the most part. I think there are some teams in this playoffs that are going to try things that are just like not their jam, to try and force compositions that they're not comfortable playing. For the Valiant, I think that they'll, for the most part, play compositions that they are very comfortable on, and as such bring a peak level. You know, if they stick to this Ash Tracer, Winston, Diva, or Zarya compositions, will that be the best composition throughout the playoffs? Who knows? But at least in the initial rounds, I mean, they're not even playing in the initial rounds because they made top 5, so there you go. But I think that the Valiant will bring a very high level to their play because they're so confident in what they're doing with KSP and Shax for the most of the time. So Valiant, a team I'm excited about. Definitely some upset potential in that regard as well because their damage players are just great for them. Number 6, we have the Gladiators, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone at this point. They have good flexibility. They've shown really good level as of recent. I think for the most part, the Gladiators, we knew they had talent and we know they had promise, but they didn't really fulfill it early on in the season. But now we're going into the playoffs, and as of late, I mean, they looked on fire. I think they bring... This is some of the best games they played throughout the season this past month, right? So I'm very excited about the Gladiators moving into the playoffs. Will they be able to take on the likes of the top 4 teams like the Florida Mayhem and the Paris Eternal? Don't really know. We'll have to see yet. But I know that the Gladiators have a good level. They've showed some flexibility where Kevster has played many different heroes and Birdring has played some Widowmaker and some other hitscan heroes as well. So this is a team I'm quite interested to see what they can bring to the table, especially if OG is in that Winston role. Like if OG plays the Winston, he's one of the best Winstons in the league. You can quote me on that. So if they're reliably able to play Winston and maybe, you know, Spaces Diva or something with that, that could be really good for the Gladiators heading into playoffs. So I'm excited to see what they can bring. This is a team that also can bring some Sombra shenanigans. So that would be quite interesting as well, I think, to see in the playoffs. So excited to see what the Gladiators can bring to the table. Atlanta Reign, not going to spend too much time on these upcoming teams because the video is now 20 minutes. My editor has gone absolutely insane at this point. He is spending his entire day listening to my voice, speculating about teams heading into the playoffs. I apologize sincerely. I will buy you loot boxes or, you know, unspecified drinks. But I'm sorry about that, editors. We'll get to that later. I'll go over these next teams quickly. Atlanta Reign, I think they have some things to figure out. They could bring good level where they couldn't. Maybe they could play pretty poorly. We'll have to see, figure out what they're going to bring into the playoffs. Obviously, losing Baby Bay earlier on in the season is quite rough for this team, and it doesn't feel like they've figured out what they really want to accomplish with Saucy and Erster, etc. If we see something like Sharp Edison, throwing that out there. Come on, Coach Brad, let's go. I think that would actually be quite exciting for this team. So looking forward to see what they can do. Obviously, they shine in something like an Orisa Sigma meta when it comes to the tanks. Don't think we'll see too much Orisa Sigma, so that might be a problem for this team. But they're number 7 nonetheless, because we've seen what they're capable of this season. Number 8, the Houston Outlaws. Hydration, the flex god, is single-handedly going to just wipe the floor with the other main tanks because of his ability to play so many different heroes that no matter what the playoff meta will be, Hydration will just channel his inner mirror one-match flexibility by being able to play so many different heroes. I don't care if it's the Wrecking Ball, the Roadhog, the Winston, hell, even the Reinhardt. Just bring me the Hydration Reinhardt. I think this is going to help the Houston Outlaws be comfortable, knowing that they have a main tank that is just absolutely insane when it comes to the flexibility part of this. I can't believe they're even here in the first place. How do you even have a damage player flex over to main tank and now it's justifiable come playoffs as well? I mean, this is just absolutely insane. So the Houston Outlaws is going to be one of the most interesting teams going to the playoffs, because if Hydration actually brings good level to this tank line because of his flexibility and it makes sense to swap around between, like live in game, they can swap over from like Winston Zarya comps to like Roadhog Zarya comps because of Hydration's flexibility. That's just going to be insane. Obviously, we'll see how much weight that really holds when it comes to these top tier matches, but that could just be nuts. And then you obviously have the damage players. A lot of you guys are thinking like, Johnny's gone crazy. He's just gone crazy talking high about the Houston Outlaws. But if you look at their damage players as well, if Dante can like play the Sombra and the Tracer for the rest of the playoffs, great. Do that. And then you have Linkser. If Linkser pops off beside Dante, this is a legitimately good team. Maybe we'll see some Jexay Mercy. I know for a fact that Jexay has a good Mercy and he could play a good Lucio. So, I mean, this is obviously a team that I'm quite astounded that I even ranked them this high to begin with. But I legitimately think there are very good reasons to respect the Houston Outlaws going into this playoffs. Will they be able to bring that high level? I mean, probably not. They always disappoint their fans. You know, I'm right there with you, Houston Outlaws fans. I'm sorry. But I'm going to hype up your team again and then we're going to be perpetually disappointed. But there is legitimately a good opportunity for the Houston Outlaws to be good in this playoff. So there you have it. I'm gonna move on before I'm embarrassed by my bad take. But there you have it out there, and I think my reasons were pretty good as well. So if you disagree with me, leave a comment down below. Say why I'm crazy for liking the Houston Outlaws in this meta. Number 9, the Dallas Fuel. And I mean, losing Decay was a big hit for this Dallas Fuel team, and they are a pretty like stiff roster. I don't know how they're going to adapt to the potential playoff meta. I think best case scenario, like Doha plays his Sombra, and then you can have Onigod maybe play like Ashe, and Gamsu play Winston, and Note play Diva. Sorry, I'm getting messages from Bren. Bren, I'm recording a video. Can you please stop messaging me? Come on, man. We're friends. But if we get into some wonky metas, I mean, the Dallas Fuel could struggle legitimately, and you know they've had their problems with coaching as well, leaving the team as well. So this could be a very tough playoffs for the Dallas Fuel, and for that reason, I've ranked the Houston Outlaws above them. So you know, rejoice, green and black, Dallas, not Dallas, Texas fans, Battle of Texas. I'm losing my mind. It's spent 23 minutes and I'm just straight talking for 24 minutes. But here we are anyway. Number 10, the Washington Justice. And I mean, I'm just putting all my eggs in the Decay basket and just hoping for the best here. I do think that if we go towards a Winston meta, will be good for Roar. And if Roar can bring some level of good play to this team, I mean, you have Janu as an off tank. That's going to help this team immensely. And then you have Decay, and you can also play Stitched alongside him if you need double hit scan, or, you know, figure out that situation. I think the Washington Justice could be a scary team going to the playoffs, and we heard in the Watchpoint selection show just how scared teams are of the Washington Justice, because they do respect what Decay brings to the table, and I think he will have a lot of impact. Needless to say, I think Decay will have a lot of impact for this Washington Justice team. Still, they're number 10 in my NA ranking, so I'm not saying they're the next coming of Ans. They're not the next coming of Ans. But still, they're moving up in the rankings. So there you have it, Washington Justice fans. I do think this could be quite exciting. Number 11, the Toronto Defiant. Haven't really seen enough of them as of late to justify moving them higher. They were really good with agilities on the Genji, but don't really like what I've been seeing from them as of late. Number 12, you have the Vancouver Titans. Their one hope is Shockwave just popping off. Could be good for them with an Ashe Tracer meta with Dalton playing the Tracer as well. But for the most part, we know this is a team that is struggling because of ping issues. We know that they have a good level to them. Will they be able to take down the likes of Washington with the K and then the Toronto Defiant as well? Hard ask. I think they could beat the Toronto Defiant, but they're 12th nonetheless. 13th, the Boston Uprising. Video's over. There you go, editors. Thank you so much for tuning into the Power Rankings. I really appreciate it. This might be the last Power Rankings of the year. I haven't really decided yet. We'll see what happens. Maybe the editors will just like burn me alive after recording a 25-minute analysis video on my Power Rankings. We'll see. We'll see you in the next episode. I don't know what's going to happen. They'll probably do some weird outro effect here and now. But subscribe to the Overwatch League YouTube channel. Leave a comment down below. Like the video. All of that good stuff. I love you guys. Please take care. Maybe I'll see you next week. Maybe you won't. Who knows? It's going to be exciting for sure. Bye.